The trolley problem. The trolley problem is a series of thought experiments in ethics and psychology involving stylized ethical dilemmas of whether to sacrifice one person to save a larger number. In this experiment, you have a trolley going down one path, and in that path, you have 5 people tied to the tracks. And on another path, you have 1 person tied to the tracks. You see this happening, and you only have 2 options. You can pull the lever to make the trolley go kill 1 person, or you can do nothing, let it kill 5 people. Personally, for me, in this scenario, I would choose to kill 1 person. Not only are you saving more lives, but not doing something is also choosing to do something. Not doing something is still an action. You still cause more lives to die.
Yeah, I mean, I would essentially say to do nothing. When you look at ethics and moral principles, there's actually 2 main strains of thoughts. One is the deontological theory, and the other is the consequentialist. The first, deontological, well, it covers the Kantian ethics, and basically what that means is you do things just because they're virtually and ethically correct, regardless of the consequences. And then secondly, there's consequentialist, which focuses on the outcomes. And this is your traditional, the ends justify the means theories, which it sounds where you come from a little bit more. So for me personally, I would urge somebody to do nothing, because the scenario's happening regardless of whether you want to call it providence, luck, fate, destiny. A trolley is storming at 5 people, and I don't know necessarily if it's our right to change the course of that and somehow doom somebody who wasn't meant to die there in the first place.
I see what you're saying, and I think that it depends all on what your worldview is. And for the worldview I have, being that of Christian, I value human life especially. So I always take the idea of, regardless if I'm in the situation or not, I care more about human life than what I think is better for me. So I do think, instead of end justifies the means, I think of what's going to get more people into heaven. There's also an instance of the fat man scenario, including with the trolley problem, where if there's a fat man big enough to stop the trolley, would you push that fat man in front of the trolley to stop it and save 5 people and sacrifice 1 man? And that asks the question of what type of people are more important than others. So for me, in the fat man scenario, I would personally push the fat man, even though it's awful. But once again, for me, if human life is the ultimatum, I wouldn't care about what happens to me if I decide to make that decision.
Yeah, well, I feel like your ethical decision is based on bigotry, which would almost completely nullify whether your action is good or not, because founded in something already in and of itself negative. The initial trolley problem, that's just based on, quality and quantity of human life. You save 5 lives instead of just 1. But throwing a fat man in front of a trolley just for the sake of him being fat, that's just an ethical decision grounded in bigotry, which in that case, you might as well just run over the 1 man who's on the tracks, regardless of whether he's skinny or whatever, because, well, that's the thought process behind throwing a fat man.
So there's also a scenario where you have the 1 person being a child and the 5 people being old people. Would you care about which side you pick now? Now you're asking the question of, does age have value on life too? So there's a lot of different factors that go into it, where what would you do depending on what type of people are on the track or not?
Well, again, I wouldn't do anything in that scenario, because I'm not responsible for any death if I just stand there. Not technically anyway. Now, through my conscience, I might feel something later, but I mean, is it a much easier world when I just refrain from the choice, period? You can also make choices behind, and also in ethics, what's called the veil of ignorance, and the fact that we don't actually know what's going to happen. So in the veil of ignorance, we're all reduced to the same level of stupidity, ignorance, So I could say, I just make a choice to ignore the results. I don't know if it's going to kill 5 people or 1 person right now. I don't know where that troll is going, So that being said, if I don't know, if I make the decision to switch the track, I might not even know which track I'm switching to. So I can just claim, or work through the veil of ignorance and not really be making a decision at all, because technically I'm not smart enough to make one through the veil of ignorance.
So what you're saying is that you would choose to pretend like you didn't know the answer, or you just choose to believe you don't have enough facts to make a conclusion that you know that you could make a different scenario.
Yeah, and I wouldn't even go and find facts, because then I feel like I might be morally convicted.
But like I said, I believe that if you have the choice to make something and don't do it, you're still choosing that choice. So choosing not to pull the lever is still a choice of killing the 5 people that the trolley is already on that one track on. So regardless of whether you think you're in the scenario or not, if you have the ability to do something and choose not to, you're still making a choice. Let me ask you another question. What if on the track, the 5 people on the track, what if they were your family members or loved ones? Would you still choose to kill that one person?
Well, biblically speaking, as a matter of fact, we have a duty to our family above all. The Bible often talks about Christ's relationship with the church being comparable to that of a husband and wife. So obviously a lot of love there. Then we also see the relationship with, parents to children being a secondary value. And then there's kind of like everybody else, right? The aunts and the uncles and stuff like that. But we have a duty to the family, especially as it be the building blocks of humanity, and so I feel like we have moral responsibilities to those people more than others.
I see what you're saying. And in my opinion, I think that personally would be really hard to choose, even though I'm making the decision to kill someone versus letting nature take its course. I would still think, even regardless of how they're related to me, I would still choose to kill one person. There's another scenario where there's an equal amount of people on each side, so where now the number of lives at stake isn't a factor, and the side where you choose to pull the lever is convicted criminals. The side that you don't choose to pull the lever on would just be strangers. Would you still choose to pull the convicted criminals for justice, or would you let it hit the strangers?
Well, I feel like that's actually presenting a totally different issue outside the trolley problem, which is one of capital punishment, in which scenario I'm still not qualified to decide whether or not they die. So I would, again, let nature take its course. It's understandable how someone might condemn the criminals, but a criminal could be anyone from a 5-year-old stealing a candy bar from a grocery store to someone who kills their spouse. So in the trolley issue, all those cases are general, and even if they weren't, it's still not my place to call.
I think that personally for me, it would be hard for me to knowingly choose to kill innocent people versus convicted people. Whether they deserve that amount of punishment or not, they definitely are more qualified for punishment than the innocent people who haven't done anything wrong. So for me, my moral dilemma, it would be kind of hard to not pull the lever, because I would rather, in the name of justice, even though it is not my place, I'm still making that choice to hurt 5 people who haven't done anything wrong versus to hurt people, whether they deserve that amount of hurt or not. They still made that choice in their life to not care about human life. So it kind of is something I feel like it might, quote unquote, nature giving them what they deserve. Even though I wouldn't obviously want anyone to die, I think that if they already caused so much hurt and they murdered people themselves, it would probably be better than the people who are the innocent people. I said it so wrong, but I debated. So I get an A.
Yeah, and I feel like the trolley problem between 5 strangers and 5 criminals, that's just a different issue almost entirely, which is one of capital punishment. And far be it from us to be judged during an execution or at the podium, the stings, as it were, for the track.
So I would say in the end, it depends on the scenario, obviously, but for me, I always look at the ultimatum of the Christian worldview lens of what's going to get more people into heaven. Therefore, human life is very, very important. So in the original trolley problem scenario, I would say I would pull the lever simply because the basic fact of less people die, therefore a possibility of more people going to heaven, and that's where I stand.
Yeah, and I understand that, but I am at the end of the day morally responsible for myself and not the spiritual state of 6 other people on the track. So honestly, if you don't have, to be relatively harsh, if you don't have your life together, then that's an unfortunate twist of fate. But that's actually not my moral responsibility to take care of you in that scenario. Now, that being said, I do not mind, preaching the gospel to somebody or talking to someone about life issues, but you can't hold me morally responsible because you don't got your stuff together, is the way I see it.
They don't get their stuff together because they found themselves tied to the track. Is that what you're
It's
saying?
such a-
Ah, you idiot!
it's
That
such a-
sucked for y'all.
it's
I
such-
don't know how you got
It's
that
such
life.
a dumb thing though, because nobody would be tied to the track. So if there was 6 people on the track, I would just be like, "Hey, get off the track,"
They can't. They're tied to the track.
which would never happen. So
What do
it's
you mean? There's literally. I'm pulling the facts right now.
completely
This happened in
erroneous.
real life.
We should handshake like we always do.
You know what? That's gonna be a thing we always do, regardless of what you think about human life and ethics, whatever. Pulling up big facts, you know what? We'll always shake on.
Okay.
You know, like,
Well, that was a good
that's
conversation.
a good
Nice
debate.
talking
Good
to you.
debate. We totally didn't rant in the middle of that. You didn't know anything about that. We'll cut that out. Bonus episode, find all the hidden secret codes, like in Gravity Falls and other things I like, to find the secret URL to find what we really think about this place. Ain't no fun.